The manuscript in your hands should never have reached you. These pages remained hidden for decades, secretly exchanged between researchers of religious phenomena and former Vatican insiders who risked their lives to preserve this testimony. What you are about to read is not fiction, but an account compiled from confidential documents, interviews with witnesses who have since vanished, and excerpts from diaries that were systematically destroyed. The story of Father Pius of Pietrelcina is known to many, but what the Catholic Church did to silence his true prophecies remains one of the most closely guarded secrets of our era. It all began in 1947, when Vatican Archives researcher Mark White discovered a sealed folder bearing the papal seal, containing transcripts of conversations between then Cardinal Alfred Ottaway and an aide to Father Pius. The documents described visions that the stigmatized saint experienced during a night of high fever, when he was unconscious for 16 hours. What was revealed in those yellowed pages was so disturbing that Pope Pius V personally ordered them to be buried in the Vatican's secret archives. That Italian spring, while Europe was still healing from the scars of World War II, Father Pius of Pietrelcina awoke screaming, fresh blood flowing not only from his usual stigmata, but also from his ears. The first person to find him was Brother Alexander, a young novice assigned to care for the friar when his health deteriorated. What Brother Alexander witnessed that dawn would lead him, decades later, to leave the order and live in isolation in the Albanian mountains, where Mark White located him in 1978. The father was no longer there. Alexander recorded on a cassette tape, his voice trembling even 30 years later. His eyes, there was something different in them. He spoke in a language that was neither Italian nor Latin, nor any known tongue. When he finally returned to Italian, he said he had witnessed the judgment of the angels, and that humanity was about to enter its final trial. According to the records White smuggled out of the Vatican, Father Pius described a cosmic tribunal where entities he called the Watchers were deciding humanity's fate. These beings were not angels, in the traditional Christian sense, but something more ancient, more primordial. In his fevered delirium, the friar depicted them as those who were here before the first word was spoken, now returning to judge whether the human experiment should continue. Most disturbing in Father Pius's prophecy was the timeline he laid out. Unlike other vague apocalyptic predictions, he spoke of precise stages set to manifest in the early 21st century. The first sign would be when knowledge becomes an ocean in which all swim, yet few comprehend its depth. The second, when the center of power shifts eastward once more, as in the dawn of time. And the third, most alarming, when men begin to alter the essence of life, playing God in gleaming laboratories. Dr. Helen Saunders, a neuropsychiatrist who studied Father Pius's mystic ecstasies in the 1960s, before her work was abruptly halted by the Holy Office, theorized that what the friar experienced might have been a rare form of expanded consciousness, where normally inaccessible brain regions became temporarily active. Mystics from various traditions describe similar experiences, she wrote in an unpublished paper. But Father Pius's case is unique for the precision and internal consistency of his visions, even when he was clinically delirious. White's manuscript included notes on at least 3 occasions when Father Pius attempted to share more details of his prophecy, only to be silenced by the Vatican. In 1949, when he began to speak of the vision during a confession with a pilgrim, he was immediately placed in isolation. In 1955, when he tried to dictate a letter to his confessor, he was medicated and kept under constant watch. In 1960, just 8 years before his death, when he tried one last time to reveal his testimony to an American journalist, the interview was confiscated and the reporter deported from Italy without explanation. Colonel John Morris, a former member of Italian military intelligence who later became a close collaborator of White, confirmed there were explicit orders to monitor all of Father Pius's communications during the last 2 decades of his life. It wasn't only the Vatican that wanted him silenced, Morris stated in a deposition recorded in Geneva in 1980. Agencies from at least 3 countries were tracking the friar. Something in his visions represented a threat not just to religious doctrine, but potentially to national security. The most unsettling documents White uncovered were fragments of transcripts written by Father Pius himself, in a cipher combining alchemical symbols, ancient Greek, and mirrored script. After years of work with cryptographers, including an ex-NSA analyst who preferred to remain anonymous, part of the text was decrypted, revealing references to something called the Watcher's Protocol, apparently a set of criteria by which these beings judged civilizations. According to this protocol, humanity would not be the first creation to be evaluated and potentially ended. Father Pius wrote of previous cycles and other humanities that came before us, each reaching a critical point in their development before facing a similar judgment. Most chilling was his claim that evidence of these prior civilizations remained hidden beneath eternal ice in the ocean's depths and in caves that never feel the sun. In 1983, Jesuit Father Thomas Brennan, an expert in apocalyptic and apocryphal texts, met with White in Paris. After examining copies of the documents, Brennan noted striking parallels with ancient Sumerian texts and the Book of Enoch, an apocryphal work excluded from the biblical canon that describes celestial beings called Watchers, who observed and occasionally interfered in human affairs. What makes Father Pius's prophecy so intriguing, Brennan wrote in his personal notes, is how it seems to unify disparate religious traditions into a single coherent narrative. He describes a cosmic process that resonates not only in Christianity, but also in Hindu myths of universal cycles, Hopi traditions of prior worlds, and even certain interpretations in quantum mechanics regarding parallel universes. For those following such accounts and wishing to continue receiving information on hidden documents and suppressed truths, subscribing to our communication channel is essential. Many of these testimonies vanish as swiftly as their carriers, and only a vigilant network of committed watchers can ensure these revelations survive systematic attempts to erase them from history. White's most unnerving phase of investigation began in 1986, when he met Dr. Lionel Chamberlain, an astrophysicist and NASA consultant called in by the Vatican in 1968 to analyze aspects of Father Pius's celestial phenomena. Chamberlain, elderly and terminally ill with cancer when he spoke with White, claimed part of the prophecy included detailed descriptions of astronomical anomalies only detectable with technology developed decades later. The friar described disturbances in the solar magnetic field that we only confirmed in the 70s, Chamberlain reported. He spoke of gates in the heavens that would open periodically, allowing the watchers into our plane of existence. Most impressively, he pinpointed the South Atlantic anomaly, where Earth's magnetic field is significantly weaker, decades before satellites verified its existence. In 1991, a strange event added another layer of mystery to the story. An unexplained fire destroyed part of the Vatican's secret archives, coincidentally consuming the section where the original documents on Father Pius's prophecies were kept. 3 weeks later, Mark White disappeared during a research trip to Sicily. His Rome apartment was found completely empty, his documents, computers, even personal photographs removed. The police investigation closed after just 2 weeks, officially concluding he had voluntarily left the country. Dr. Sophia Mason, an archaeologist and linguist who had aided in decoding Father Pius's writings, carried on White's work clandestinely. In 1994, she published an apparently innocuous academic article on comparative symbolism in medieval religious texts, hiding in footnotes and bibliographic references a code conveying some of White's discoveries. The most controversial aspect of Father Pius's prophecies concerned the Catholic Church's own role in the coming judgment. According to the deciphered fragments, the mystic believed religious institutions had distorted humanity's true spiritual nature, and that the Watcher's protocol required a direct linkage between human consciousness and cosmic reality without institutional intermediaries. What is to come is not an end, but a recalibration, Father Pius wrote in one coded passage. The Watchers seek not worship or obedience, but understanding. Humanity will be judged not by its piety, but by its capacity to evolve beyond the limits of current perception. In 1998, Lieutenant Colonel Gabriel Thompson of French military intelligence contacted Dr. Mason after finding references to Father Pius's documents in declassified Soviet archives. The Russians, it seemed, had monitored the Italian mystic since the late 1940s, intrigued by reports of his psychic abilities and predictions. The Soviets had an entire department dedicated to parapsychological phenomena, Thompson explained in a confidential recording. They saw Father Pius as a potentially valuable case study for their SciTech program. Interestingly, after sending agents to observe him closely, they appeared more intent on suppressing information than exploiting it. Whatever they uncovered frightened them deeply. The Soviet files included transcripts of interrogation sessions with an ex-assistant of Father Pius who had defected to the Eastern Bloc in 1952. Identified only as Subject K, this man described the friar entering altered states during which he could see through the veil separating dimensions. More disturbingly, Subject K claimed Father Pius occasionally communicated with entities he described as neither angels nor demons, but something far older and beyond such categories. Dr. Mason linked these accounts to passages in the coded manuscripts, where Father Pius mentioned the ancient Watchers, those present before time was measured, who witnessed the first spark of consciousness and now return to see what we have done with the gift of thought. In 2002, an unexpected discovery shed new light on the investigation. During the restoration of the cell where Father Pius had lived in St. John Rotunda, workers uncovered a sealed cavity in the wall. Inside was a small metal container holding a rolled parchment. Its contents were never officially released, but one worker, Anthony Ferris, photographed it on his cell phone before Vatican authorities confiscated the artifact. Ferry's images showed an Italian text, seemingly in Father Pius's handwriting, accompanied by intricate geometric symbols and what appeared to be constellations. The text began, "To the one who finds this, know that what I write is not prophecy, but witness. What I saw exists not in the future, but outside time as we know it." The restorer gave the photos to a local journalist who posted them on an obscure blog. Less than 24 hours later, the blog was hacked and the images removed. 3 days on, Ferris was found dead in his apartment, apparently of a heart attack, despite being only 42 and having no cardiac history. Frightened, the journalist handed copies of the photos to Dr. Mason, who immediately noted parallels with White's documents. Particularly striking was a diagram showing overlapping temporal cycles, with markings that, when analyzed by an astronomer consulted by Mason, corresponded to planetary configurations set to occur between 2023 and 2029. What Father Pius described was not a traditional apocalyptic event, Dr. Mason concluded in her notes, but a kind of cosmic singularity, a moment when human consciousness would reach a critical threshold, coinciding with specific celestial alignments, creating a window through which the Watchers could manifest more directly. In 2006, former Vatican librarian Monsignor Paul Venture gave an anonymous interview to an independent documentarian, revealing that documents related to Father Pius's visions had been reclassified under Pope John Paul II's orders at the EU. End of his pontificate moved to an even more restricted section known as the Archivum Secretum Extremum. "There is knowledge," Venture said, his face obscured and voice digitally altered, that the Church deems dangerous not because it contradicts faith, but because it transcends it. What Father Pius saw went beyond traditional Christian cosmology, suggesting a reality where distinctions between angels, demons, aliens, deities, and interdimensional watchers become merely semantic. In 2010, the investigation took an unexpected turn when Dr. Mason was contacted by Dr. Emil Rivers, a theoretical physicist specializing in string theory and quantum physics. Rivers had found Mason's coded papers and recognized in them descriptions that aligned with emerging cosmological models. "What fascinates me about Father Pius's writings, as you present them," Rivers wrote, "is how they seem to anticipate concepts we are only beginning to formalize mathematically. His portrayal of the Watchers as beings existing outside time parallels what theoretical physicists describe as four-dimensional entities, hypothetical beings that might perceive our space-time continuum in its entirety, much as we can see all points of a line at once." Rivers highlighted a particular passage where Father Pius described the Watchers as capable of seeing every moment in human history simultaneously, from the first spark of consciousness to the last breath of the last human. This depiction, the physicist argued, closely mirrors how modern physics conceptualizes a being existing beyond three-dimensional temporal constraints. In 2012, something even more extraordinary happened. A small group of independent researchers, including Dr. Mason and Dr. Rivers, obtained what they believed to be a complete translation of Father Pius's coded diaries. The document arrived anonymously on a USB drive at Mason's apartment in Turin. Its authenticity could never be fully verified, but linguistic analyses indicated consistency with previously authenticated fragments. The complete text described what Father Pius called the Great Observation, a period beginning in the early decades of the 21st century, during which the Watchers would intensify their scrutiny of humanity. This period would coincide with technological advances enabling humans to manipulate life and matter itself, as well as with unprecedented climatic and geopolitical upheavals. "They will watch our choices when we stand at the threshold," the mystic wrote. "It is not about salvation or condemnation in the traditional Christian sense, but an evolutionary moment. Civilizations before us failed this test. Their remnants are scattered yet deliberately obscured." Particularly unsettling was the passage describing how the Watchers occasionally manifest through anomalies, phenomena classified as religious miracles, paranormal encounters, or UFO sightings, depending on the observer's culture. These manifestations, he explained, were not the phenomenon itself, but shadows cast into our dimension when the Watchers focused their attention on specific events. In 2015, 3 members of the research group abruptly left the project without explanation. A fourth, Dr. Rivers, was committed to a psychiatric institution after an apparent mental breakdown at a physics conference in Geneva, where he attempted to present a paper linking his higher dimensional theories to Father Pius's descriptions. Recordings of his presentation, cut short after 8 minutes, show him speaking increasingly fast, alternating languages, and furiously sketching symbols reminiscent of those in the coded texts. Dr. Mason, increasingly isolated and paranoid, left Italy in 2017, relocating to an undisclosed location in South America. Before disappearing, She entrusted copies of all her research to 3 different individuals, instructing them to safeguard the documents and only publish them if she did not make contact for more than 2 years. In her last known notes, Mason wrote, "What disturbs me most is not the content of Father Pius's visions, but the coordinated effort to suppress them. Why are so many different institutions, the Vatican, governments, even scientific organizations, so determined to keep this information secret? What do they know that we are not seeing?" The final fragment of her research attempted to decipher a particularly obscure passage in Father Pius's writings that seemed to describe how humans might recognize the Watcher's presence in daily life. According to the mystic, they sometimes left imprints on reality, synchronistic events, déjà vu, shared dreams, and other phenomena usually dismissed as coincidences. Most importantly, he suggested that in moments of exceptional conscious intensity, deep meditation, religious ecstasy, or even extreme creative focus, the human mind could momentarily perceive the dimensions inhabited by the Watchers. Since 2019, sporadic reports of unexplained phenomena, from atmospheric anomalies to collective mystical experiences, have been catalogued by a small group of researchers aware of Mason's work. When mapped globally, these incidents seem to follow patterns corresponding to the observation windows described in Father Pius's texts. Meanwhile, in the Vatican, persistent rumors speak of a special commission formed under the current pontificate to re-evaluate certain aspects of Father Pius's mystical writings, particularly those concerning what he called the Great Judgment. Anonymous sources within the Roman Curia suggest this re-evaluation was prompted by recent findings in the secret archives and by unexplained events occurring within the Vatican walls. What Father Pius truly saw during that feverish night in 1947 may never be fully known. The original documents remain inaccessible, their investigators scattered or silenced, and the institutions capable of confirming or denying these claims maintain an unyielding silence. Yet, as we move through the early decades of this new century, the signs he described seem less like apocalyptic prophecy and more like the lucid observations of a man who, for a brief moment, saw beyond the veil of consensual reality. If the Watchers are indeed among us, evaluating our civilization in a cosmic trial, as Father Pius believed, then perhaps the real questions are not about the authenticity of these documents or the credibility of their interpreters, but about what this observation means for our understanding of human existence. Are we, at this very moment, unwitting participants in a cosmic evolutionary test? Our collective destiny determined by choices we do not even realize we are making? And if you, reader of this manuscript, occasionally feel as if you are being watched, even when you know you are alone, or experience those inexplicable moments of clarity when the world seems suddenly more vivid and meaningful, perhaps you should ask yourself, might these be subtle signs of the Watcher's presence in your own life? And if so, what are they seeing when they look at you?